I wanted to provide some frequently asked questions and answers regarding bond measures here in California. So let's start with what is a definition of a bond fund? According to the California Department of Finance, the DOF, a bond fund is used to account for the receipt and disbursement of non self liquidating bond proceeds. Who pays for bonds? According to the DOF, depending on the provisions of the Bond Act, either the general fund or a special fund pays the principal and interest on general obligation bonds. What's a revenue bond? Broadly defined, a revenue bond is a type of municipal bond that's repaid by the operating revenues of the public entity that issues the bond. Who uses revenue bonds? They're primarily utilized by governmental entities to subsidize infrastructure projects. Who guarantees a revenue bond? The financial obligation is primarily guaranteed by the operating revenues. The assets, such as an infrastructure project, are used as collateral for the bond, which is the loan, of course. What does GO stand for in a GO bond? It means general obligation, an obligation of the state or local government in this case. What is a GO bond? A general obligation bond is a municipal or state bond measure that's backed by the good faith and credit of the issuing state or local entity. What's the source of funds for a GO bond? These types of bonds are based upon the taxing authority of the issuing state or local governmental entity rather than from the revenues, say, from an infrastructure project. What is the collateral used with a GO bond? Assets are not used as collateral. GO bonds are premised on the debt obligation being repaid through taxation or other revenues of the governmental entity, again at the state or local level. Are bond measures submitted to the voters? Some types are. For example, bond measures proposed by a local or state entity where the security for the bond would constitute a lien on the property for ad valorem taxes within the jurisdiction are subject to submission to the voters. Now, when a bond issue goes to the ballot, what must be provided for to the actually provided to the voters themselves? Basically, state law requires a statement must be mailed to the voters with the sample ballot for the bond election. The statement must contain specified information that's detailed in the statute, including the best estimate for average annual tax rate, highest tax rate, and total debt service incurred by the bond issuance. It also contains a declaration of policy of the legislative or governing body, as well as a statement of tax rate data to explain to the voters so that they can review it prior to casting their vote on the proposed bond measure.